Good morning, everyone. We are now continuing with our Art of Supportive Leadership. We're almost at the end of this book, just a few more sessions, probably. Let us begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, Friend and Guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Bless us with your grace, that we may be lifted above the confusion of our own minds, the longings of our own hearts, into the clarity of your guidance and your love. Om, peace. Amen. Today is Monday. Monday is Money Monday, every Monday. I remind all of you that I'm able to do the work I'm doing because of your generosity. And if you wish to continue this, what we call the mission of the Masters, your help is greatly appreciated. You can donate on a regular basis through Patreon, which is a wonderful website for bringing creative people together with those who have resources to support them. You can donate directly through my Asha Joy website, if you prefer just to do an intermittent on your own terms basis rather than a subscription. I also encourage you to, if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I was, the last time I looked, I needed 70 more subscribers to have 10,000. And once I reach 10,000, I think heaven and earth will rejoice, and I can stop mentioning it because there won't be any other landmarks after that for quite a while. But I really appreciate doesn't begin to say it. It's just, it makes me so happy that there's so much enthusiasm for Master's work and so much loving support for my being able to continue to pass on to others what Swamiji gave to me. It makes every morning I wake up happy. So I'm very, very grateful to all of you. Okay, now let's go on with leadership. And we are in the section that is called, this is the next to the last chapter, 11, Work with People's Strengths, which really has been the entire secret of Swami's success as a leader. So, where you see an opposite cause from your own winning, give in gracefully, just as long as high principles are not at stake. Swamiji was extremely good at being able to tell the difference between something that actually would affect the direction of the work and something which was just a matter of opinion. Now, there's a lot of issues that you can feel very strongly about because it might be an aesthetic consideration or just a preference about how you can see it, or you actually know it's a better idea. But it's really not about the basic principles of what you were doing. A lot of this comes out in terms of design, in terms of, I mean, like when you're making publicity materials, for example, what images are used, what the designs are, what the writing says, what the tone of the writing is, the architecture, the design of a room, the way an office meeting is conducted. You know, there's lots of different things that you might really feel this is a much better way to do it. But there's no principle here. It's not a question of right versus wrong. It's just, this is a nice way to do it, and this is another way to do it. So Master Swamiji was always he gave in as much as he could when there were strong feelings. I mean, if everybody just went along with his vision, that was also lovely. But if there were strong feelings, he gave in whenever he could. So that when he had to hold firm, people had the feeling that he'd been fair and that he wasn't just being stubborn, and that when he put his foot down and said, no, it really needs to be this way, you knew it wasn't like, because it was just his habit of wanting to have it his way. And he says even further, where you see an opposite cause is winning, he said, give in gracefully. Being able to to concede gracefully gives people a lot of confidence in you. And it also, see, everything that the leader does models what right behavior looks like. So when you as the leader recognize that, well, the tide's going against me, we'll just do it your way. And you don't give in grudgingly, and you don't sort of hold it. There's this terrible habit that some people have, which is they keep score. And then later, I mean, I had a friend, God bless him, who he just kept score. It's like whenever something would happen that I did that displeased him, which happened on a regular basis, he would always, he had, it's like he'd literally written it down. Maybe he did. He was able to go back at the beginning and just tell me everything I'd ever done that had offended him. And finally I just said, like, when will this end? Like, how many times can I say, yes, of course you're right? You have to always be reminding me, no, you need to be gracious. You need to be gracious in error and defeat, and just let it go. Just let it go. And then everybody else knows, oh, that's how we deal with it. Things happen, things rise and fall. In the course of Ananda, Swami has described these cooperative communities are laboratories of human behavior. I have literally had the same friends for 50 years, and not just one, not just like a blood relative, but I have dozens and dozens, even 100 or more if I really counted them, of people who are really close friends that I've really worked with. So we've had a long time to see how these different rhythms work. And being able to give in and forget it, just let it go. It just creates a culture in which people can be easy with each other. Of course, most people don't have the luxury that we have of lifelong community, but the same principles which are demonstrated in the big picture are also true in all situations. If you see another side winning when there's not true principles at stake, just a matter of opinion, just give in graciously. Yes, we'll buy that china set. Yes, we'll paint the room this certain color. Yes, we'll buy that refrigerator instead of this one, whatever it might be. This is an example from marriage, but it's very charming. Swami Kriyananda's parents were married for 60 years, and they had a uniquely harmonious relationship. Swamiji said he never knew them to have an argument. He said he couldn't remember them even having a disagreement. And his father, who had a humorous streak, his name was Ray, his wife is Gertrude. He said, right after he got married, he said to his wife, he said, Gertrude, I'm the man, and I'm going to make all the important decisions in this marriage. And then Ray said, and after we decided to get married, he said, there just hasn't been another important decision to make. And it was just such a sweet way to put it, but it was also profound, because he knew what was important, which was their love for each other, their harmony, their respect, and they just never allowed anything to supersede it. And neither of them was suppressed. They just respected each other. When they were at the end of their lives, he had a heart attack, and I went and lived with them for 6 weeks. And then another friend from Ananda came and lived with them for 2 years until both of them had passed away. But during that time, I just watched it up close. And I mean, there were 2 occasions that I loved. I'm just going to digress on this, but it wasn't small. This is more about marriage than business, but not really. Marriage is just a very challenging form of friendship. It's not different. I was cooking, and I had the egg beaters. I was using the whatever you call it, the mixer, and the 2 blades got caught with each other, and the thing got stuck like this. Gertrude was very much very female in the way she would respond. Oh dear, we'll just have to call the repairman. There's just nothing we can do about it. We'll have to call the repair. We'll have to take it in. You can take it in tomorrow, Asha. And Ray kept saying, I think if we just applied a little force, it would be fine. But neither insisted. Both of them just left it. And then sort of when I was alone in the kitchen, I applied a little force and managed to get it undone. And I showed that I had fixed it, and Ray just said, I thought a little force would do it. He was too weak by that time to do it himself. But she was genuinely admiring, and he was genuinely patient. And on another occasion, the same cycle of time, his hearing had gone really bad. They needed a new television. He didn't want her to buy it because they needed the one where you could put the headphones in and like this. She wasn't going to be told by him that she couldn't buy a television. Of course she could buy a television. So she went and bought the wrong one, and it was delivered, and it didn't work. But there wasn't a hint of blame about it. It was just like, well, now we have an issue, and we'll have to figure out how to work it, and we called the next one. But what was so impressive was just she had a perfect right to make that decision, and she made the wrong one, so now we'll solve it. Now just think how rare that is. In all circumstances, business, home, children and their parents, marriage, friends. It's just like each one has the right to be themselves, and we're in this together. So if your judgment turned out not to be quite right, instead of saying, see, I told you so, instead we just say, okay, so now the situation we have now is, and so how are we going to solve it? Your life will be much happier if you can integrate this. I know both sides of it. I know the positive side that comes from it, and I know the negative side from not doing it. I'm speaking personally, because it's not so easy. So we should practice all the time. So, for to concede defeat gracefully is not really defeat at all, but a very special kind of victory, one for which people will honor you, and others far more so than for the times you were proved right. Because it is about your character. It's nice that you have talent, but character counts, friendship counts, support counts. Encourage those who are willing rather than those who demonstrate unwillingness. For usually it is no specific request you make of people that renders them either willing or unwilling. It is some habit in them, a reactive mechanism they've developed for handling every challenge. Now that is a super important point. For usually it is no specific request you make of people that renders them either willing or unwilling. It is some habit in them, a reactive mechanism that they've developed for handling every challenge. Now, he's not just talking about leaders handling other people. He's talking about you as the leader. Everything about this teaching is how to be a fine and integrated person. And there are people who, just as Swami says it, who handle every challenge by saying no. And Swami says, encourage those who are willing rather than those who demonstrate what you would have to call chronic unwillingness. No, the people who say no, it's just like the energy just never goes anywhere. And some people actually pride themselves on, now wait a minute, we can't be sure. But it's not just a question of like sort of ferreting out what's true or what isn't. It's like energy has its own intelligence. You see, everything in this book weaves together. And energy has its own intelligence. Swami has talked about how when you start moving energy, then it reveals itself. It shows you what's going to work and what isn't. If you stop that flow of energy because, wait, we can't do anything until we've got it all worked out, then just by definition, your ideas are going to be puny because you don't have any magnetism flowing through you. And many people are afraid of energy. That's where he says they've developed some habit within them for dealing with challenges. Any challenge comes, any suggestion, anything that's going to require change or new energy or has some element of uncertainty or a tiny bit of risk. No, 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 no. And then everything freezes while we spend endless amounts of time trying to drive down to the most deepest level when the tiniest thing might go wrong. And by then, everybody who's got any capacity to do anything is just so bored and so frustrated that they'll quit. Literally, they'll quit. And you'll end up with, you can't let those kinds of people, you can't let those kinds of people get influence because you will actually lose everything. it's not that you should be foolish. I mean, we've talked about this enough already. But the no-saying principle is not helpful. Discernment, yes. But I'll deal with the challenge by freezing the energy until I can feel secure. And the leader must be careful about that in himself, and he must be very careful about it with his team. I mean, just watch. You don't want to deal with challenges by trying to shrink. You want to deal with challenges by getting bigger. That's what the whole of life is about, to expand rather than to contract. And if you have a habit in yourself of contracting to feel safe, that's a very fundamental quality if you ever want to be a leader that you need to get beyond. We had one meeting with Swamiji. Swamiji was so much stronger in this than any of us. I mean, I had a problem. He criticized me for being negative once, and I was very surprised because I think of myself as very enthusiastic. Oh, he said, because you're so factual. That's where he used it, factual, like that. And he was right, that I had a tendency to deal with challenge by wanting to get mastery over it, rather than by meeting it. By that I mean I wanted to control the energy, rather than being able to dive in and flow. We had this meeting once, which Swami later described as one of the best meetings we ever had in all the years that we were there. It was before we'd built this Temple of Light at Ananda Village, which was built in 2019. It was dedicated. This was decades earlier. We had this plan about this temple that we would build. And I don't know what happened that day, but we just started planning it. And we ended up, we had a cupola at the top that had, glass, cut glass, prism glass, so that the light would come through and shoot rainbows. And then we put some gemstones up in the cupola. And I mean, everything. There was absolutely no limit to what we could imagine. And we just all did it. Really, and nobody said, we can't afford it, we'll never be able to build it, how will we raise the money? It was just, and it's interesting because it wasn't only because Swami commented on it, but all of us remember that meeting, just vividly. There was just some freedom, some willingness to imagine that I think is the secret of real greatness. That those who really accomplish don't have any, they don't say no, they just say yes. And they see how far the vision can go and then find out how they can walk with it. I mean, that's who Swami is. I remember Swamiji saying, people laugh at me when I say we're going to have 200 people attending Spiritual Renewal Week, and they think I'm a dreamer because only 40 people come. He said, but if I didn't see those 200 people there, we wouldn't have had even those 40. That's a very interesting thing that he said. And he said it very emphatically. So lots to think about with that. For yourself personally, fear praise more than criticism. Isn't that an interesting statement? Most people are waiting to be praised. Fear praise more than criticism. For the snare into which too many leaders fall is not criticism, but flattery. He said, never court popularity. Be concerned rather with issues, with causes, with principles, than with popular claim. Swamiji was so honest and careful in the way he supported people. It's like, it's very easy to just lavish praise on people. But even they will know that there's something not quite right here. And in the position that I've been in for so many years, every so often in my life, somebody has come in who just lavishes praise on me, just constantly. And I just wait, because I know it's just a matter of time before they turn against me. Because it's just not, it's not grounded. I mean, I'm a good person. I work hard. I do the best I can do to help people. I mean, it would be, I know that about myself. I've cultivated it for 50 years. I hope I have some ability to be helpful, but it's not, it's just exaggeration. We have to be truthful, is what we have to be. And also and so when people start coming to you with that sort of thing, don't fall for it. Swamiji used to, because toward the end of his life, when people were really, and I think justifiably, completely enamored of him because he was so amazing. There was no question about it. And sometimes someone would give an introduction for a talk that he would give, and they would lavish praise upon him, which I understand the sincerity of it, but there are better ways. There are better ways to introduce someone. And Swami would say after all of that, he would describe himself, and then suddenly a little mouse would come out on the stage. That's how he felt about it. Just the proportion of the flattery compared to the person. This little mouse would just come out on the stage because he never fell for it. He just never fell for it. The way, the ideal way for the leader to feel that way, I'll speak of it for myself, and this is also the way Swami did. He was a disciple. Swami was a disciple of a great master. He had lived with Paramhansa Yogananda. He'd lived with one of infinite consciousness. And Swami described himself, his own self-concept was that of a little boy. And it wasn't because he didn't know what he was capable of, or what he had accomplished, or what his responsibilities were, or even what his capabilities were. He was perfectly conscious of who he was and what he could do. But he always compared himself to infinity. And also, it was just so much nicer. He said once he was walking through the forested area above where Crystal Hermitage is, where the nuns lived there. He was just walking through that area. And he saw the little lights, at that time it was little kerosene lamps in the trailers around there, and he thought to himself, there was nothing here before. And now, because of my efforts, he said, people are living here and we're having a community. And he said, and for just a couple of minutes, he took personal credit. But he said, but it just felt terrible. He said it felt so contractive and so binding. And then he just pushed that thought out of his mind and realized, isn't it beautiful what God has done? And then he said he just felt so free again. When you fall for flattery, you get trapped in this narrow ego idea. When you're only thinking about, well, I hope they like me. I hope that, they're going to speak highly of me. I hope they give me the awards. I hope my society really recognizes me. I hope everybody knows how good I'm doing. Oh, I can't say that to this person because they might not like me. You get so confused. You get so confused. And if your tendency as a leader has been to please people, here you have some work to do. Because lots of times you have to displease people. It's just part of being a leader, is that you have to make hard decisions that people won't like. And that's why all these other principles are here. And if your first thing is to be well liked, you'll just get so confused as to what the principles are. And Swamiji was also wonderful. He never flattered other people. He never played to people because they had money or they had influence. There was a period of time, I think I've told this story earlier, but I'm going to repeat it here. He was in somewhere in the United States. I'm not going to mention the names. And it was a woman. This woman became interested in Ananda, became involved in it. And she personally was one of the richest women in America. She had a family fortune, a huge family fortune. And she became very interested in what we were doing. And so much so that when Swami visited the city where she lived, she invited him to be her house guest. And she was beginning to get engaged. And, like a patron on that scale would be naturally something that would be very helpful if you're trying to do a work like ours. And of course, that was a reality. And Swami also knew that because this was family fortune, this poor woman had always been taught that all anybody wanted from her was her money. And she was constantly surrounded by flatterers. Swami thought he was going to decide he would be her sincere friend. And he was at her dinner table on his second or third visit, and it was probably the second visit. And the discussion turned to women's rights and things like that, which is a very controversial area. And he knew that she had certain opinions. And Swamiji is the most egalitarian, unbiased, unprejudiced person ever. So there wasn't a hint of that in him. But her thinking was muddied. And he wanted her to understand that he didn't go along with every sort of random, trendy thought on that particular subject. So he spoke not inappropriately, but clearly about where he stood and what he thought was appropriate and what he thought was just sort of delusion. He knew she wouldn't like it, but he wanted to be sincere with her because everyone around her just flattered her and always told her that she was right. And as a result, she completely dropped away and never wanted to see him again and never did. Swami said it was very unfortunate because we could have helped her. Quite apart, whether she could have helped us was not the issue. But he said sooner or later she was going to find out. He said so that we were not going to agree with everything she said, and that everything she said was not right. Was she here to learn something new, or was she here just to be in charge as she'd always been allowed to be? And Swami said, I'm here to help her. And it wouldn't help her to just flatter her like everyone else does. He was just like that. He wasn't courting popularity. He wasn't concerned with trying to please. He was trying to be helpful and to tell the truth. And that's simply where it was. And that's how I've always known him to be. He tried as hard, as much as he could to win people in a positive way. But if it was necessary for him to take a stand, he never hesitated to do it. And if people turned against him because he would rather live by principle. And he would rather lose everything than give up on principle. And you, as a person who was relating to him, we had to learn to trust him and to believe it. I remember in one particular situation, and again, this was such an unusual situation, but as it happened, it had to do with music. But one of the men who at that time had an influential position in the music made decisions that Swami just really thought were not appropriate. Ignoring Swami's music, doing other music. And Swami spoke to him very forcefully and critically in a very public way, which was very unusual. And the next day, Swami got a letter from one of the other singers essentially saying to Swami, why did you speak to him like that? And Swami's answer was very interesting. He said to the letter writer, he said, in order to explain to you why I did what I did, I would have to tell you more about that man that I was criticizing than you have any right to know. It was also unusual the way he responded to the letter. But in all cases, Swami said, these are the principles. I'm not here to please you. I'm here to help according to how my guru tells me to help people. Now, there you have it. Never court popularity. If you're waking up in the morning wondering if people like you, you have to do some work on yourself, or you have to ask yourself whether you've gone farther, that you're in the wrong position. It's a wonderful sadhana for those in positions of leadership, to seek their confirmation with principle and with divine rightness, rather than just trying to have everyone around you like you. That's why Swami says, fear flattery more than you fear criticism, because more leaders get trapped by flattery than by any other way. So my friends, God bless you.